Epidemic 2020 made a video response to Theoretical Bullshit's Treatise on Morality, and this video of mine is a response to one of Epidemic 2020's arguments. First, he says that objective values exist, that we're hardwired to accept this, and one of these objective values is that human life is objectively valuable. Second, objective values require a non-arbitrary foundation, that looking to finite beings like humans, it's insufficient. All theories grounding objective morality outside of God are in some ways fallacious or incoherent. Conclusion is that God is the only rational explanation for a non-arbitrary foundation for objective values. Now, I actually don't have any objection to the points he makes in his second premise. I won't argue against the notion that objective values require a non-arbitrary foundation, and I won't argue against the notion that all theories grounding objective morality outside of God are in some ways fallacious or incoherent. Instead, my argument will be why we don't need objective morality in order for morality to have at least a fairly sturdy foundation, and that I find it a false dichotomy to say that either morality has to be objective or it's just arbitrary. And I believe that if you, Epidemic 2020, will agree to at least temporarily play along with my worldview, at least for the length of this video, and accept my premises in the same way that you would accept the premises of a science fiction novel, then I think the two of us will end up in agreement. Now, I plead ignorance on whether there are thinking life forms on other planets and whether there are other universes beside the one that we live in, the one that started expanding some 13.73 billion years ago. But for the purpose of this science fiction novel that I'm inviting you to visit, let's just say, for argument's sake, that the Earth is the only place where this freak accident called life ever happened, and it was some 4 billion years ago, against incredible odds, that the first self-replicating organism emerged, and that for the next 3 billion years, life didn't evolve past simple cells. Now, I think you would agree with me that for those 13 billion years or so, at least in such a setting, that there would be nothing one could call morality, objective or otherwise. After all, the main objective value you cite is that human life is objectively valuable. So because humans haven't evolved yet, and there are only things like stars and planets, and on this one pale blue minuscule dot, there are even much more minuscule things called cells that are simpler than bacteria, then morality is something that just doesn't apply yet, it doesn't exist. So let's fast forward our novel several 100 million years, and sexual reproduction and evolution have taken off, and now we're up to social animals. Now here the roots of morality start to develop. Now when we think about the struggle for survival and for reproductive success, violent competition is often thought of as the crucial factor, but caring and cooperation can sometimes be just as important. Now of course we can't say with certainty what the behavior of prehistoric animals was like, but for the purpose of this science fiction novel, let's just say that social animals of the past were similar to social animals of today, which often work together in order to raise their young and to warn each other of predators and to hunt their food and to fight their predators, fight their enemies. And we can see a cooperative behavior like this in all sorts of the so-called lower animals, not only with the likes of lions and hyenas, but even hawks and bats. To give just one example, vampire bats, those that have had a successful night on the town, out sucking blood, they'll exhibit something akin to what we might call altruism by regurgitating blood for companions that have been less successful. Now, I'm not suggesting that bats think about altruism the way humans do, but natural selection favors this cooperative trait. For bats that fail to share, will in turn be denied when the tables are turned, and thus uncooperative bats are less likely to survive, less likely to reproduce. So natural selection does favor at least reciprocal altruism. Now, if we fast forward to 25 million years ago, to the early ancestors of monkeys, we can see morality evolve even further, to even include notions of fairness. And this is because this novel will assume that these early monkeys are similar to the ones mentioned in the September 18th, 2003 study in Nature magazine called Monkeys Reject Unequal Pay. And this was an experiment in which monkeys were taught to exchange pebbles for cucumbers. And they're happy doing this until the experimenters introduced inequity by giving certain monkeys not cucumbers but the more desirable treat of grapes. And at that point, the cucumber receiving monkeys became irritated about the unfairness of being shortchanged. They sulked, they threw their cucumbers away. So even though they'd been satisfied with that food earlier, well, now it had become a symbol of injustice, so it became repulsive to them. Now, if we fast forward another dozen or so million years to the evolution of apes, we can see even further refinement, the ability to anticipate the reactions of others. Because in this novel, I'm going to assume that the apes of the past were similar to the apes studied in the book called Our Inner Ape. A leading primatologist explains why we are who we are. And in that book, the author, Franz de Waal, cites an experiment with a chimp, a bonobo actually, that are similar to chimps, in which a bonobo named Pan Benicia is given the highly prized snack of raisins. And Pan Benicia can see that all the other bonobos near her really want those raisins too. So when Pan Benicia calls for more, well, motions for more, she motions that the caretaker give the raisins not to her, but to the other bonobos, not her. So the author writes, "What fascinates me is the connection with resentment. All one needs for the larger sense of fairness is to develop is anticipation of the resentment of others. There are excellent reasons to avoid arousing bad feelings. Someone failing to share is excluded from feeding clusters. At worst, the one being envied risks being beaten up. Was this why Pan Benicia avoided conspicuous consumption in front of her friends? If so, we are getting close to what may be the source of the fairness principle, conflict avoidance." So, by the time our novel gets up to the evolution of modern humans, starting some 50 or maybe even 30,000 years ago, it's here where the word morality really starts to make sense. And it kicks into perhaps even a higher gear when we race ahead to only a few thousand years ago, when humans started to create things like governments and religions, in which rules involving morals can be expressed in written words and contracts and what we call sacred scriptures. But the roots of this morality goes back millions of years, and the roots are all based on survival, reproductive success within a social setting. That is, for apes and humans alike, those that are overly aggressive within their own community are shunned, sometimes even ganged up upon and killed, and don't get a chance to pass on their genes. Mothers, again whether ape or human, that don't have any compassion for their young are most likely, are not likely to pass on those genes, given that their babies will most likely die before given a chance to reproduce and pass on those uncaring traits. So this perspective bypasses objective morals because this idea wouldn't make any sense for the first 13.5 billion years of our known universe. And if the Earth is destroyed by nuclear war or meteorite, or when the Earth definitely will be destroyed in about 5 billion years when our sun runs out of hydrogen, once again, without a living and thinking existence such as we have in human life, I don't see how the idea of human morality, of objective morality, can make any sense. But this natural explanation does account for at least a fairly sturdy foundation for morality. That is, within the short time frame that humans have existed. And it also explains why certain moral rules are common in almost all human societies, namely things like community prohibitions against theft, assault, rape, murder, and then even more evolved aspects like prohibitions against false witness. These are not arbitrary, but they have deep evolutionary roots based on survival within a functioning community. So when it comes to behavior that may or may not be directly linked to survival within functioning society, that's where we find things differ greatly from community to community and from age to age. Rules on things like polygamy, homosexuality, prostitution, gambling, alcohol, slavery, toleration of differing beliefs. With all these, societies can survive while having a wide range of different practices. So, to Epidemic 2020, I hope this hastily prepared video of mine can coherently explain why, at least within this science fiction setting that I've described, the idea of objective morality doesn't make sense, while at the same time, morality that's based on survival within a community isn't completely arbitrary either. Now, there are lots more areas to branch off onto, and I know I could do a much better job with this video if I spent some time with it and actually revise the script, but demands of my family and job are calling. Or in other words, the demands of care for my immediate kin and attention to my means for food, clothes, shelter, and savings. So I unfortunately have to prioritize. But my thanks for all of you who continue to tune into my intermittent videos. Thanks.